It's really a tremendous pleasure to be here with you this evening. How many presidents, chancellors are in the room? Wow. Faculty members? Sustainability directors? Second naturites? All right. Well, business office, provosts. Okay, we know where. Okay, and business offices. All right. Anybody I left out? Corporate sponsors. Bravo. We wouldn't be anywhere without you and without all of you. Well, it really is a great delight, as I said, to be here tonight. I want to make some comments, and I very much want this to be a discussion because I'd like to open it up to your thoughts and issues and concerns. And whenever I hang out with college presidents, I really have a great time because I started as President Knapp noted, I came out of CNN, I came out of journalism, so I'm sort of a non-traditional guy here. But I am rooted in higher education. I started with I taught for a bit, and then I ended up as a trustee at my alma mater, Middlebury College, up in Vermont, and they shipped us off to Harvard to trustee boot camp. And the first person we got to hear from was a college president who says, here's what you need to understand about me and about us. And I'm sure you all invoke this line or a variation of it. She said, being a college president is like being the proprietor of a graveyard. She said, everybody is beneath you, but nobody is listening. So I don't know if that's true, but I promise to listen tonight. Apparently that hit a nerve. I want to also say that I commend what you're doing and the reason that you're here. You've stuck your neck out, many of you, and you've signed this climate commitment. You work every day to move it forward. You work against great odds, and increasingly, and I want to talk about this in a minute because it is a really strange thing, what appears to be an increasingly skeptical public about what is going on out there and the science behind it. But your commitment to this, your work, your dedication, and it's one of the reasons I love being here, makes you, by definition, optimists. Because you believe in the science, you believe in the people who are doing it, you believe in the students, and you believe in the future. And that's really why I'm here. And it's why I'm so thrilled to be with Megan and with President Knapp as they're making sustainability a focal point. I pulled this thing together when I came over from CNN for a variety of reasons, and I will talk to you about that in a little bit. So my background was mostly CNN. Before that, I was at the Associated Press, and before that at Voice of America. So I have been a sort of global broadcaster, global communicator almost all of my professional life. I've had unbelievable opportunities to travel and to see history and to be in the front row of history. And I sometimes now can't quite believe it. Especially you get a little older and you look back and, oh gosh, those pictures of that young guy up there. And just, you know, some of the places that I draw from when I put all of these experiences and observations in perspective. I was on the tarmac when our hostages came out of Iran. I was there with Reagan when he said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall. I mean, you hang around with a guy pretty long enough and you start to sound like him, and then that gets really scary. But I was at the White House for Gulf War I, and that's when CNN exploded as a global communicator, and we saw the power and the revolution of real-time global communication where people could talk long before the internet and email and Google and Facebook, but they could talk to one another directly through media. What we've done is we've sped it way up. We have put people in touch with one another directly across the media, but nonetheless, that power was clearly on display. I was at the West Front when Barack Obama took the oath of office, and we saw the first African American raise his hand and say, I do. And the emotion and the unity and the sense of history and the incredible arc of this country was there for all to see. It didn't matter where you came from. Now, I say these things not to name drop, maybe a little, but truly not to name drop, because sometimes I sort of feel like Forrest Gump, you know, in the box of chocolates. But to sort of put in perspective that I've been very fortunate, and I've seen a lot of media. But I left the traditional media, and I came to the university because I was growing increasingly frustrated about what the media were doing and how they were doing it. Great at covering a crisis, great at covering an event, worse and worse at covering an issue, less and less inclined to cover complexity, worse and worse on the subject of attention span. And I thought, what a great opportunity if we can bring the platform of the university and everything that the university has, its expertise, its inquisitiveness, its sense of destiny and future, the young people, the diggers and, as I say, the diversity across ages and races and disciplines, and capture that and leverage it up and out. And that is part of what I'm doing here and part of what I've done. There is a bias in media. I know that will surprise you. I teach a class in media ethics, and I joke it's a short class, but not really. We dive deep. I also teach media bias, and I'm quick to point out to people I'm not teaching people how to be biased, but I'm teaching them what bias is and how to recognize it. But the bias, I think, in media is not left, right, or liberal or conservative. It is a bias towards negativity. That partly is baked into what we do because we're meant to hold power to account. That's a good thing. But it has gone overboard a bit in times. It is also a bias, I think, in shouting, scandal, conflict, the accentuated, disproportionate sense of perpetual crossfire. And crossfire's off the air, but it's not really off the air. And that's the problem. And still, people get, every Pew and others show us, they get the preponderance of their news off of television. So we can talk about how great the Wall Street Journal is, and it is, how terrific The Economist is, and it is, but the bulk of our population is getting their information in other places, not in the deepest and most thoughtful places. I think that it's also, as I mentioned, there are consequences to this. If we connect the dots, right, between what you hear and what you think and what you conclude, what you believe, who you hang with, and then the action that you're going to propel, if you're getting bad information or you're getting tilted information, it becomes a problem. Recent polling, to come to our issue here, quoted just this week in an NPR story, maybe some of you heard of it, and I know, quote, a media company and a media critique, so that's really good, but, you know, it's all right, suggests a troubling lack of understanding in the public, among the public, about this issue of climate. 18% of the people, almost 1 in 5, don't think global warming is happening at all. Less than half believe that if it's happening, it's caused principally by human activity. There are other polls that show that people, you know, an even larger majority don't think that anything will happen in their lifetimes. Hello? Only 39%, according to this, the story and the numbers that they were using, believe that most scientists think global warming is happening. Okay, this is great sourcing. That's down from 47% answering the same question just 3 years ago. We're going backwards. 40% of people think there's a lot of disagreement among scientists about whether or not global warming is happening. So NPR reported if the public did know about the consensus among scientists that the Earth is in fact getting warmer, that they're more likely, and we've seen this in surveys and studies as well, if you understand that there's consensus, it actually adds to your sense and to your own purpose of what you believe yourself. Why don't people know about this consensus? Well, I'll give you one little piece of insight. Because I've been in the newsroom when the editor says or the producer says, get the other side. Where's the other side? And this sort of moral, factual equivalency, and we've documented this in some of the media studies and content analyses, is a real problem. We have 90% of scientists on one side of an issue, and we quote the other 10%. You have to be very careful how you quote that 10%. There was an article written, a very good one in the Columbia Journalism Review, about 3 years ago about objectivity and whether we've gone too far with objectivity in the sense of defining it as merely trying to represent all sides or both sides, when in fact that's a false choice and a bad choice. So what do? Well, you started doing some of it, which is to get involved and make noise. Making noise, though, is really hard. It's hard to break through. It's hard to get attention. It's hard to get press. You probably all have very hard-working, dedicated people in your press and public information shops, and you're constantly beating them up and trying to get out there and get your own headlines and get quoted in the right way. But you can't give up. We've got to start and propel a dialogue. Our efforts need to go beyond just engaging the climate issue as it currently exists, because we've got to be much more clever about it. We've got to use social media. We've got to use our students. We've got to use our scientists in new and different ways. It's really interesting. Jim Beiser and I have had a chance to really get to know one another, and Jim's involved in all kinds of scientific places around, and I've started speaking not just with Jim and Jim's crowd, but just yesterday I was on the phone conference call with Nina Fedorov, who's the new president, the current president of the AAAS, and they're putting together a conference in Vancouver for next year, and they are trying to talk about how do scientists tell their story? How do we get it out there? We got to fight. We got to communicate. The National Science Foundation came to GW and they conducted a science communication day and symposium. We were partly involved with that, again, to try to empower scientists to be storytellers. There's a problem there, though. Not every storyteller is a scientist, and not every scientist is a storyteller. And we can't pretend that this is just going to be wave a magic wand and we can all tell the story and live happily ever after. But we have to try, and we have to look for better ways. I'd like to talk to you for a few minutes about what this project, this experiment, this little lab that I'm trying to build here at GW is all about. And if I'm successful, I hope that you will have a lot of questions about it, and I hope that at least some of you may join us in it, because to me, it's all about this experiment. And that's why speaking to this room is such a thrill for me, because my vision, I mean, look what's in this room. The intellectual horsepower of the people you lead is beyond belief. One of the reasons I got so involved in energy, climate, sustainability is I did a documentary for CNN, and I traveled all over the place. I went to the deep waters of the Gulf before the oil spill, and I went out of the deep water Millennium. Have any of you been there and seen one of these things? You know, you kind of have to put your arms around some of this technology to really appreciate the genius of our species. The idea, I'm standing on this, I come in on helicopter, I'm standing in this gigantic thing. They're drilling 6 miles down. 6 miles. I think about how long it takes me to drive 6 miles in Washington. That's like 5 days of my life. But they're drilling 6 miles down, and they're hitting this pocket of stuff, right? And then they're pulling this stuff up, and they're putting it in this tank, and then they're taking it someplace else, and then I put it in my car and I go someplace. I mean, think about that. That's just amazing. And they're holding this gigantic drill rig in place with GPS positioning and thrust. There's no anchor or anything. They're in a mile of water. So it's so high tech. It's so unbelievable. And then I went to the oil sands of Canada. You heard about those? This is pretty old technology, and the biggest trucks on the planet to just scoop the hell out of the earth and then use synthetic techniques. It works. It's 1 million+ barrels a day of synthetic crude that they're now generating. And I went to Brazil, and I drove through the sugarcane fields in a Chevrolet, General Motors, powered entirely by sugarcane ethanol, alcohol they call it, in a country that's running 40% of its transportation fleet on the stuff they're growing all around me. And I'm thinking, we've got nuclear power, we got all, and yes, it's dangerous, and yes, there's risk. We know that. We're human beings. We take risks. We fly to the moon, and things blow up sometimes. But this kind of incredible ingenuity and genius is what really propelled me into this. So, all right, so I leave CNN because there's no attention span and there's no complexity, and I come to the university. I'm thinking, what can I do that matters, that will inspire young people, that has legs, as we say in the business, that's going to be around for a while, and that's exciting? And I ended up with energy, climate, sustainability, because we're fighting like hell about it. There's lots of ignorance. There's lots of breakthrough. There's lots of research. There's lots of cool technology. And young people really care. And I say to these young people when I talk to them now, you're going to be in the workforce. You're going to be working in 2050. If you have kids, there's a pretty darn good chance your kids are going to be alive in 2100. This is not some distant, strange place that's hypothetical. This is your lives. And when you come back to your alma mater for your 25th reunion, and I promise you it will happen sooner than you think, if we've gotten it wrong, you know, you may be treading water where you had that first party or something. So I think of it this way. What if there were a way to harness the power of social media to solve our shared challenges? What if the next great breakthrough in energy, climate, or sustainability were a user-generated idea or a science-shared idea away? What if we created a reality show? What if we created a media experience to encourage participation, bring in new voices, highlight best practices, and if I can friend you, that we can get together and collaborate? We did a pilot about 2 years ago, and the sort of moment for me was when some of our students, we had students in lots of universities, several universities participating in a group at Roger Williams University. Is Roger Williams here? No. Roger Williams University went out across the way, found a guy in Rhode Island who was the town planner, or the head of the Economic Development Authority, and they were building a wind turbine. And he walked around and he showed it to them, but what he was really talking about was how they financed it and how they were going to make money on it. So we put it up. This was in our early days. We didn't have social media friending capability at the time. And I got a call from a guy in California because he talked about these zero-interest federal bonds that they were using, how they were going to create additional power, sell it back to the grid, and make money. And I got a call from a guy, and he said, we're trying to do that very thing right here. How can I contact him? Well, now we can say, friend him. So what if we can use media with science or entrepreneurs or business people to connect folks directly? That's what we've tried to do at Planet Forward. At Planet Forward, we brought it here. We're using Fuzz Hogan as my executive producer and is our intrepid leader on the project. We have several students. We have some interns from other schools. And the idea is we put out a call to answer the question, right? Not to ask the question. What if we're using this media not to just ask questions, but to try to answer them? For people to upload their videos, our first question was, what's our energy future? Our next question was, talk about innovations. We switched to innovations to tell us about energy efficiency. Our current question is about building smart communities to grow and adapt on a changing planet. Now that's technology, that's architecture, that's infrastructure, that's all the things you're doing, we're doing, that we're researching and our students actually care about. So we're getting some great ideas, and what we do with these is we put them up online, planetforward.org. We have weekly webisodes where we push them out on various blogs. We go up to a monthly appearance that I do with these ideas on Nightly Business Report on PBS, and twice a year we shoot an hour special. And the idea is it's a little reality show. It's a little Meet the Press meets American Idol here. Because we let there be competition, because that's the other thing we like to do. We like to compete. We can play basketball, we can play football. What if we could get competition in, okay? Because we all want to be mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the greenest of them all, right? And our students, I mean, we've got the solar decathlon coming, and we've got some any of you solar decathlon competitors? No. So we've got a couple of teams in the solar decathlon who are posting regular videos on their trajectory coming to Washington, a little reality show online. We ended up with some community voting and everything with 7 finalists for the TV show. And we had a panel of judges. It really was. We didn't have Simon. We couldn't get Simon. And Paula couldn't possibly cry enough for this sort of thing, so we didn't have her. But let me tell you what some of the finalists were. So from ASU, Arizona State University's Lightworks project. And they shot a video on how to harness the sun and some of the kinds of research that they're doing there. From GW, we had this student team. They found this, and they went and did the coolest darn piece. Are you familiar with the renovation project that took place up at the Empire State Building? So they did this. So they found this, the guy who did the windows, and it's a company called Serious Materials. They replaced all 6,200 windows in this place without removing any of them off the premises to truck them back and forth. Pulled them apart, put argon gas in between the panes, and they quadrupled the R value of the windows as part of a major project to fix up the building. The building saves 38% of its energy of what it was consuming before. We interviewed Tony Malkin, who owns the Empire State Building. He says there's a 3.5-year payback. He's able to have more competitive rents because he's been able to bring his energy prices down, put more business real estate in. And these students captured this story. And they opened it with this hysterical montage that's worthy of David Letterman, of people on New York saying, "I think it's got 3,000 windows," and just a very clever, engaging, funny thing. I challenged my students. How many of you, anybody here not been to YouTube? Okay. How many of you, this is my favorite YouTube thing, how many of you have seen Charlie Bit My Finger on YouTube? Okay, you're showing your years. Ask one of your classes, I promise you the numbers will be different. So it's this ridiculously goofy video of this little kid with his brother on his lap. How old is Charlie there? He's 4 or 5, and his brother is probably about 18 months, and his brother puts his finger in Charlie's mouth, and Charlie does what? He bites him. And the kid's British, so he's got this Charlie bit my finger. 300 million views. So my challenge to the students is, what if, I'll take 1 million if you can teach something. Teach me something. Inspire me. So that's what they did when they went and they found the Empire State Building. One of our top vote getters came from the University of Arkansas. They had a research team in the labs looking on algae biofuel to butanol, and a pump they were doing. And we got, and they submitted this video, and they were the top vote getter online after the television show. We used the television show to promote them. And I have an email that I wanted to read because it's in our roundhouse here, from Jamie Hestekin, who's the chemical engineering professor who led this research team. And here's what he wrote after they won this thing. And they came to Washington to be part of the program. And it was so cool. They were just so proud. For too long, in my opinion, he writes, science has sat idly by as the funding for our projects continues to be cut. It's easy because much of the public doesn't understand what we do, and so they aren't bothered if the funding goes away. For our part, we're happy going to conferences, publishing in journals, and ignoring the public, other than an occasional news clipping or local television spot. Here's the self-serving part now. The program you present is different and revolutionary. It holds the potential to educate the general public by forcing us in science to relate rather than just talking amongst ourselves. If Planet Forward is successful, I believe the public will make it impossible for long-term deep cuts to come from science because they'll see the value in technology and demand that it continues. I wish it were that simple, because in the media world it's not, and Planet Forward will not have that impact. I'll take a shred of it. But I loved what he said, and the recognition and the power. He goes on, actually, I meant to read this to you, because he goes on to say, this is why we tried so hard to win. It was not only me liking to win or trying to advance our particular technology, but a belief in what we're trying to do. I've received emails from teachers, this is since he was on, emails from teachers, fashion designers, farmers, bankers, coffee baristas, employees, etc. They all shared the view that technology was important, not based on what I told them, but based on the video they saw. So suddenly something connected. And that's what we need to do more of and do better of. Because these laboratories, these places where you're modeling behavior and researching new technologies and understanding new things is something that needs to be, I think, shared much more broadly with the public to counter those numbers I talked about a little while ago. We had 3 judges in our program. Jennifer Granholm, former governor of Michigan, very involved in energy and teaching now at Berkeley. She referred to this as innovation idol. Who was she? Was she Paul? She wasn't Paula. She was almost Paula. We had Andy Revkin, who is from .Earth. You probably know his blog. And he was almost Simon, because he's just a journalist, and journalists are just reliably grouchy. And we had Tom Connolly, who is executive vice president and a scientist himself, executive vice president and chief innovation officer from DuPont. Industry, academia, science, truth-telling, I like to say, and advocacy, which is what Revkin's job was, and policy. Can we get traction with this? Let me tell you something very interesting about this, though. What we realized doing this is we couldn't just tell the story. That wasn't enough. You know who Roone Arledge was? President of ABC. Roone Arledge revolutionized the coverage of the Olympics. How? When you watch now, and it's really frustrating if you actually want to see the sport, mostly it's the melodrama about each of, young so-and-so started off with all the deck against her. She couldn't breathe, she couldn't think, she couldn't sit, and suddenly she's like whizzing down, oh God, I want her to win, I love her so much. You're connecting with characters, okay? That's what we decided to try to do. Connect with characters. Who are these people in the lab? They're pioneers. They're trying to unlock mysteries. They're trying to get to the bottom of it. They're trying to invent the future. So that's one thing. Second, we cannot just sit around and do the eat your peas. The planet is getting warmer. It's just a terrible thing. We're going to have to pay more. Okay, that's fine. We can do that. There's a place for that. But back to that drill rig again, this incredible capacity we have to invent. Have you ever seen, what's it called, ice truckers, ice road truckers? What is it? I mean, if somebody had come to me and said, I'm going to do a series on people driving across ice, I'm thinking, oh, that's going to be really interesting. But we can make, if we're a good storyteller, you can make just about anything interesting. I had a friend, can I tell a slightly off-colored comment here? Am I going to get in real trouble? Yes? Yes? No, okay. So I have a producer friend who decided that he was going to make a reality series about steelworkers. It's a pretty good idea, except he wanted to call the show Iron Erection. So, but it was going to be how you put up skyscrapers. And there were going to be cameras and guys' hard hats, and they're climbing. And you think about that, suddenly it gets to be pretty scary and, maybe a little cool. Can we do it in the lab? Can we do it about how we come up with this stuff? And now, and here's what I think is what we're trying to do, is recognize the technology we've got and hand the camera to the kid. Give the camera to the professor. Use our film and journalism departments where we have people who want to be professional storytellers and marry them up with the people who aren't the professional storytellers but are the subject matter experts. And let them go to town. And we say, you can't be promotional, but we want you to be informational. And then we want to hear about your innovation and who you are. So we've got several hundred videos up on the site now. If you go to planetforward.org, you'll see it. Not long ago, we had President Obama on campus here at GW. It's more name dropping, right? We can do that when you name George Washington. And I went to the speech. It was his deficit speech, and I can talk to you about that if you want to. I thought on the deficit issue it was a little disappointing. But he did say something that I thought was very powerful and resonates through this project and should resonate through everyone in this room because it's why you're here. America is a land of opportunity and optimism, he said. We're a nation that built a railroad across a continent and brought light to communities shrouded in darkness. We've led the world in scientific research and technological breakthroughs that have transformed millions of lives. That's who we are. And it's true. That is who we are, and it's what we're doing. You know what else we are? We're storytellers. That's what we as a species are. That's what the Bible is. That's what the Quran is. That's what we have done through generations and through our native populations in every country, from cave walls to tweets. I'm not sure what are tweets doing to our storytelling. Gotta go, security's tight, hashtag. Okay, that's a great story. But actually it is another form of storytelling, and that's part of its power. We tell stories in all different ways. How can we, how can you, how can your institutions tell better stories? And what is the impact of that story if you tell it right on the larger public. I think it can be transformative. It's not easy, and there's a lot of noise and competition out there, and a lot of people who say they're good at it aren't. But our job should be to advocate for that and to promote it and to try to go there. I think this story is great, this climate story, because as I said, it's got all the elements of a terrific thriller. The stakes are really high. The suspense is killing me. There's lots of conflict. There are heroes, and there are villains. There are villains. So we can use the tools at our fingertips, I think, to connect some of these things. And I've talked a lot about what's wrong with the media. So let me talk for a minute about what's right, and then I'll shut up and open it up to anywhere you want to go. I think we need to focus first on innovation and invention because it's fundamentally optimistic. It leads us to talk about solutions because there are solutions, and that's what inspires people. Solutions inspire people. We talk a lot on the academic side of media and journalism about how we frame an issue. What if we frame the issue of climate around the good things, the technology that it can spur, the jobs that it can create, and the answers that it can find to fix a problem that's intractable? Anybody who's been to China, I was in China about a month ago. I was on the 11th floor of a very nice hotel that, by the way, had over the water, "Do not drink this water." And I could not see 4 blocks down the street. It was unbelievable. A couple of days later, the wind came through and it was clear, and I saw mountains, and I'd never seen Beijing that clear. I had no idea what I'd been missing. But this matters, and we've got to convey that. You signed this commitment, for those of you who signed it and the others who are fellow travelers, because you believe in a dialogue and you believe something can happen and you believe you can model behavior and have an impact. And that's what I think the storytelling and the dialogue that you can generate and the new media that you can use to do it and to convey it can all do. You have the platform. University is an incredible platform. It's why I'm, so I was at CNN, Chicken Noodle News, Clinton News Network, you're liberal, you're stupid, blah, blah, blah. I moved to a university. Yeah, there's a little liberal stuff that gets thrown around, but what are universities about? Everybody wants to go. Everybody wants a degree, right? That's where that's where we discover things. That's where breakthroughs happen. You have experts on your campus, you have young people on your campus, and it's the future. So I think, and I said this to our students when we started, actually it was the students who named Planet Forward. I said to a group, large group, I said, someone out here can be the next Gates or Curie or Jobs. We got a lab here, let's figure out what to do with it. I believe in them. Some of them make me crazy, but I believe in them because I've seen such phenomenal capacity in these young people and dedication. And so I think you're the educators. We're the educators. We're also students. And we're also keenly invested in this question of the current deadlock and the future solution. So I just would leave you with a couple things, and then let's talk. One, encourage your students to be storytellers. Encourage your professors to do all the research, but to figure out how they're comfortable storytelling. Some will do it on a blog, some will do it in tweets, some will do it in a book, some will do it in a film, some can do it, they can pair up. I encourage the pairing. I mean, it's one of the things that's happened at ASU where the School of Sustainability has gone across and tried to knock down the stovepipes. The best pieces we had that I've seen on Planet Forward came out of this Roger Williams group that was particularly inspired, and the students in the journalism program went over to the architecture school. And they let the architects be the experts, and then they packaged it in really compelling ways. And some of them did raps, some put it to music. One kid wrote a sonnet. It was unbelievable. And we need to encourage people to be non-traditional storytellers because that's what cuts across. So I love the name Planet Forward that came from our students because I do think, and we use it, we say it's time to move the planet forward. And that's the optimism that I would leave you with. So I will take your questions in any way that that you'd like to express them. Thank you very much. Anybody want?
Take some questions.
Paul.
Frank, some of us are of an age.
Sorry?
Actually remember when the word mass media had some meaning to us. Can you talk a little bit about how you see mass media today? It's kind of the holy grail, what we all look for in terms of exposure, but I think it's different than what we thought it was 20 years ago.
Yeah, we talk about mass media, we talk about broadband, but we really should talk about narrowcast. Because, first of all, you're all your own newspapers and television stations now. You've all got websites, you're posting video, you're doing that. The mass media have become disaggregated. Young people in particular have very little brand awareness. There's an increasing problem in television. They talk about over-the-top television. Over-the-top television means you watch 30 Rock, but you watch it via Hulu or on your computer, and you don't even, and we see this with our students, they don't even know it's an NBC show. So the idea of mass media has become much, much more challenging. We have both structural and cyclical challenges with mass media right now because you've got this giant shift to this new paradigm, even as we're going through the terrible shakeout from the recession and the fallout. So you've got far fewer reporters doing things built around specialties, so getting to the mass media is hard. Network newscast down 50% in 25 years. Cable numbers are down. Local television numbers are down. The only thing that's up, according to and if you're interested in this, I encourage you to go to journalism.org. The Project for Excellence in Journalism does an annual State of the Media report, and they break it all out. Fascinating stuff. But the only growth area, of course, is the online, in the area of online media. And we just did a report based on FCC data that are actually showing these hyper-local sites, these online, have negligible traffic. So where people are consuming information on locally, they're still doing it through the old legacy media that have online expressions. So it's WTOP.com or something like that. So if you're trying to communicate, you have to do what Obama does. Go on Jon Stewart, do a round of satellite interviews with local stations, go hyper-local and do blogs, do a Facebook chat, have the old editorial board in. It's the all of the above strategy. And even then, you don't have the impact that you used to have. Bill Moyers told me, he said, when he did, I don't know if any of you remember, he did a positively brilliant documentary in the mid-'80s on the state of the black family. And it had major repercussions, including, and other things he's done, congressional hearings. He said, he says, I just don't have, I can't do that anymore. He says, it just doesn't resonate the same way. So it's an all of the above and on and on and on strategy.
Yet you said that we still get all of our news from television.
The public gets 80% of its news from television. Approximately 80% of the public say they get most of their news from television. So that's the paradox. That's the problem. Local television is just I could have worked in local TV, but I could also done other stupid things, but so I didn't. And the networks, none of the broadcast networks have documentary units anymore. So it's really the paradigm has shifted very dramatically.
I'm curious about a couple of things related to that. One is when I talk to people about climate and they make these arguments, I find their talking points on Fox News. And I've noticed lately Fox News' ratings have started to really drop off. So I don't know what that means. But I also wonder, is there something in all of this that's teachable to the folks who kind of bring the negative message to say it doesn't exist or whatever? Is there anything that can be done along that without making it this us and them? Is there any kind of teachable way?
Well, I think so, and it's one of the reasons why. One of the reasons we've made the decisions in the Planet Forward team that we have, what we're going to focus on for the next year and highlight in 2 broadcasts, and I hope get lots and lots of input from people. We had a really interesting salon because we're going to touch on climate adaptation, and I know that's pretty controversial in some places, but it's actually fascinating. If you show people what's already happening and show people what folks are doing who aren't politicians, all right? So when you see that New York City is using a different asphalt now because they've determined that their summers are hotter, when you hear that CSX is using wooden railroad ties less because in certain areas there's more flooding and they just rot quicker, when you see that communities are requiring, if you want to put an extension on your house, you can't put an extension on your house unless it's X number of feet now above sea level, and you may have to raise your house. When you make it real for people, you kind of leapfrog all this other stuff. So fine, they can talk in Washington about whether it's happening or not, but if CSX is that's just business, that's just happening. And I think that is a very powerful way to connect with people. You still need to engage the argument. This is not about stopping this and doing that. It's about doing, again, it's all of the above. And that's, that's what you have to do. I believe that. Time for one more. Yes?
I'm fascinated and really love the fact that you're talking about storytelling. I'm a math person. I have finally become a storyteller. I know what that means. But for most of my science faculty, for my technical people, they still think in academic papers and in how to write a research report. How do we get them to this mode for storytelling? As your premise has been, we need them to be storytellers.
Send them to Storyteller Boot Camp. We'll whip it into. All right, if we tell Dr. Scientist, you have to start your lecture with once upon a time and end it with they all live happily ever after. Well, first of all, I think there's actually some training that we can do. I mean, the NSF was doing it. We were participating in that. The AAAS is talking about it more. I think we can emulate good storytelling. What do we mean by that? It's one of the reasons here's what we found, by the way. So the premise of Planet Forward is user-generated content. You're a student, you're a scientist, you're an entrepreneur, you're any of these things. Tell us your story. Guess what? Most people aren't good storytellers. So we have to help them. So before we put it on TV, we take it, and so we take the idea and use it as a point of departure. We build the story around the character. Thank you, Rune Arledge. We turn you into a mystery solver and an innovator or what have you, and then we hand it back, we hope, whole. But we have to emulate some of this without dumbing it down. Though that's the danger, and that's hard, and it also requires time. It's not going to be 140 characters, and it's not going to be a minute 45 TV piece. So it's a very, very challenging thing. But I think there are good storytellers. We have a scientist, chemist on our faculty here who I am determined could be the Jon Stewart of science. I mean, he's funny. He's incredibly smart. He's got this kind of plastic face. We could do all kinds of things with him. But maybe it's to find some people. But then you have to deal with the academy. People can resent their colleagues who go out and become rock stars like that. I don't want you to write an op-ed. That's not what academics do. You're researching. Wait. Hold up. You've got to get it peer reviewed and whatever before you can talk about it. I had a huge, not a fight, but I tried to get a colleague to just talk about the research you're doing, and he wouldn't do it. And it was in very interesting lithium-ion battery research that he was working on. It's hot stuff. But he was reluctant to do it so my instinct as a journalist is come tell your story. And his instinct was, wait a minute, I gotta prove this, I gotta go through my peer review process. So there's a tension here that as part of getting there, this is an answer to your question, we have to recognize that tension. We can't minimize that tension. But then we just do it anyway.
Do you think the bridge might be commercialization in some cases?
What do you mean, commercialization? It could be.
To a venture capitalist.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we've thought about doing is making it a contest, and that's what EPA does with the P3 thing, and that we had a lot of entries from P3. That's what the solar decathlon is. This competition thing is very, very, very useful, and I think we can capture that more. But I also want to see, I want to see what you're doing on your campuses better known in your communities and across the country. I mean, what some of us are doing is pretty cool stuff. And I'd like to see us connect that more compellingly to the communities around us. So, anyway, thank you. Thank you. I'd love to make a little plug. If any of you are interested in being part of the Planet Forward project, because we'd love, I mean, my dream is that suddenly this becomes viral and it goes grassroots and students and others are doing it because they want to tell their story and be famous and shape a public conversation, an important public conversation. If you'd like to be part of that, Fuzz is the executive producer. He's here. We've got some material outside. We would love to have more participation. The more the merrier, and we will find ways to elevate you and your institution and the people there through these different media channels that we've got and these other channels that we'll create along the way. It's an experiment. It's an experiment. We'll see what we can do. Thanks. Thanks.